Welcome, dear friend, to another quiet journey we share together. I am grateful that you are here in this moment. Tonight, you are gently invited to touch a stream of timeless wisdom, carried silently through generations of practitioners who discovered the subtle doorway into deep stillness and genuine rest. If you wish, you may softly notice the time where you are and the place from which you are listening. There is nothing you need to do with that awareness. Simply let it be. In this space, I will offer a carefully gathered collection of Zen-inspired stories, each one holding a simple key to clarity of mind and freedom of heart. These stories whisper teachings about how to relate differently to worry, to frustration, to the endless movement of thought, and to that quiet longing that always seems to ask for more. These are not stories meant to entertain or distract. They arise from a deep understanding shared by awakened teachers who realized something essential. Peace does not come from fixing the world outside us, but from transforming the way we meet it within. As the ancient sages observed, at the very center of your being, the answer already rests. You know who you are. You know what you truly seek. As we move gently through these teachings, you may begin to feel a subtle shift. The weight you have been carrying can start to loosen. The stream of thoughts may slow, like water settling in a quiet pond. Without effort, you may find yourself drifting into a place of understanding that feels both spacious and calm. So now, allow yourself to arrive fully. Let your body be held by whatever supports you. Take one slow, mindful breath with me. And as you release it, trust that the wisdom meant for you has been waiting patiently for this very moment. Let us turn now to a story about the quiet power of selfless service. Long ago, in the mountains of ancient Japan, where pale mist wrapped itself around tall pine trees and prayer flags moved gently in the wind, there lived a Zen master known throughout the region for his deep understanding. Seekers traveled great distances hoping to receive his guidance. Yet despite his reputation, the master spent his days performing what seemed to be the simplest of tasks, patiently weaving straw sandals. Each morning, as sunlight brushed the mountain peaks with gold, the master gathered dried grasses and sat in silence. His aged hands moved with calm familiarity, forming one pair of sandals after another. They were plain, without ornament, yet strong and comfortable, shaped with complete attention and care. When several pairs were finished, the master would walk down the winding path to the main road used by pilgrims and travelers. There, upon a broad stone smoothed by time, he would leave the sandals and return quietly to his temple. He never waited to see who might take them. He never asked for gratitude, payment, or recognition. He did not even explain why they were there. One day, a young monk, filled with longing and ambition for awakening, approached his teacher. 4 weeks he had watched this ritual, feeling increasingly confused and frustrated. Finally, he spoke, his voice tight with concern. "Master," he said, "you possess such deep wisdom, such understanding of the Dharma. Many people would come to hear you teach. You could give talks, lead retreats, write commentaries on sacred texts. Why do you spend your precious time making simple sandals when your words could change so many lives?" The master did not stop weaving. He listened quietly. When the student finished, the master looked up briefly, his eyes gentle and bright with compassion. Then he returned his gaze to the straw in his hands and spoke softly, like fog drifting through the mountains. "The path is long," he said, "and the stones beneath our feet are sharp. To ease the journey for another, this is the teaching. As the Buddha taught, thousands of candles may be lit from a single flame, and the flame is not diminished. Happiness does not decrease when it is shared. At the heart of this story is a simple truth. Genuine spiritual teaching often appears not in eloquent words or grand gestures, but in quiet actions that reduce suffering wherever they arise. We often overlook small kindnesses, believing that wisdom must be dramatic, visible, and praised. Zen reminds us that the conditioned mind is drawn to what is impressive rather than what is subtle, to what is celebrated rather than what is anonymous. We live in a world that counts followers, measures impact, and seeks recognition. Yet the deepest truths often move invisibly beyond numbers and applause. Each pair of sandals left on that stone was a living teaching. They showed that wisdom and compassion cannot be separated, that insight without service is incomplete, and that the highest realization often looks exactly like ordinary kindness. We tend to measure meaning by visible results. Students taught, books written, lives dramatically changed. But the master understood something quieter, that preventing one blister, comforting one tired traveler, or offering help without being seen may plant seeds of awakening that bloom in unseen ways. In our own lives, these opportunities appear every day. A colleague overwhelmed by work, a neighbor who needs a small favor, a stranger who drops their belongings, a friend who needs nothing more than a patient listener. These moments may seem insignificant, yet they are invitations to practice the same wisdom. As one Zen teacher gently reminds us, practice is not about special experiences, but about how we meet the experiences already here. The master met each day with a simple question: how can I serve? The answer arose naturally, through awareness of what was needed and a willingness to offer what he could. His weaving was his meditation. His service was his teaching. His daily life was his practice. There was no separation. And as another teacher softly taught, the most precious gift we can offer one another is our presence. Now, let these words settle like leaves on still water. There is nothing to hold, nothing to remember. Simply rest, knowing that even the smallest kindness carries the fragrance of awakening. The Master offered his presence not only to those who formally sought his guidance, but also to unknown travelers who would never learn the name of the one who helped them. This quiet generosity reflects the purest form of giving, free from expectation, free from recognition, free from the need to be seen. Tonight, as you gently reflect on your own path, you may ask yourself what simple sandals you are weaving. Perhaps they appear as a kind word offered to someone who feels heavy with discouragement. Perhaps they take the form of patient listening, given without interruption or advice. Perhaps they are small gestures of care that soften another person's difficult day. These offerings may seem small when compared to grand ambitions, yet they carry the same quiet power as the Master's humble work. The Buddha reminded us that, in the end, only a few things truly matter: how deeply we loved, how gently we lived, and how gracefully we released what was not meant to remain. The sandal-making Master lived these truths without words. He loved through service, lived gently without seeking praise, and released the ego's desire to be impressive. In his simple routine, he showed that the highest teaching is often hidden within the simplest response to what others need. As our journey through Zen wisdom continues, we arrive at a teaching that reveals the true nature of gratitude and kindness. At the entrance of a mountain monastery stood an old wooden gate, shaped by many seasons. Its frame sagged with age, its paint had faded, and its hinges cried softly with rust. Several boards had loosened, no longer fitting as they once had. Seeing that the gateway to their sacred space needed care, the abbot decided to hire a carpenter from a nearby village. The carpenter who came was known less for his skill and more for his low prices. He arrived with a heavy expression and a quiet resentment, as though the work itself were a burden. From the beginning, his attitude shaped his effort. He chose the least expensive wood, still green and easily warped. His measurements lacked care, leaving joints uneven and corners misaligned. As the days passed, the monks watched with growing unease. Gaps appeared between boards, wide enough for wind and rain. The hardware was weak, the structure unbalanced, and the gate hung at a slight angle, resisting each time it was opened or closed. When the carpenter declared the work finished, the abbot came to inspect it. He stood silently before the crooked gate, observing every flaw. Nearby, the carpenter waited, tense and defensive, as though bracing for criticism. The monks held their breath, expecting their teacher to demand corrections. Instead, the abbot reached into his robes and produced the agreed payment. Then, to everyone's surprise, he added a generous bonus. Bowing deeply, he offered the money with sincerity. "Thank you for your excellent work," the abbot said warmly. "This gate will serve our monastery well. Your effort is appreciated." The carpenter froze, unprepared for such a response. Confused, he accepted the payment, murmured a faint reply, and hurried away, tools clutched tightly in his hands. Once he was gone, the younger monks gathered around their teacher, unable to hide their distress. "Master," one said, "that man deceived us. His work is poor, and he knows it. Why praise him and reward him? Does this not encourage carelessness?" The abbot looked at them with calm understanding. "His work," he said gently, "belongs to him. Perhaps he is troubled. Perhaps he lacks the skills he wishes he had. Perhaps he is passing through a difficult season. That is his karma to meet." He paused, allowing the silence to deepen. "My response, however, belongs to me. I have chosen gratitude over criticism, generosity over judgment. I have planted a seed of kindness. Whether he nurtures it or ignores it is not my concern. My part is complete." The Buddha taught that hatred never ends through hatred, but only through love. This is an eternal truth. The abbot's response reveals that our reactions to others' failures often reflect our own inner state more than their actions. Why is it so difficult to meet disappointment with kindness? Zen teaches that we cling tightly to outcomes. When reality fails to match our expectations, we suffer. We forget that our standards are preferences, not universal laws. We also give others power over our inner peace, allowing their mistakes to disturb our calm. The abbot remained at ease not because the gate was well built, but because he knew his peace was his own responsibility. There is also the habit of judgment, the mind dividing the world into worthy and unworthy, deserving and undeserving. This constant evaluation turns every encounter into a test. The abbot stepped out of this pattern, choosing compassion instead. Throughout your day, similar moments appear quietly. The order made incorrectly. The driver who cuts ahead. The colleague who misses a deadline. The friend who forgets to call. Each moment offers a choice: irritation or understanding, judgment or kindness. As one teacher reminds us, the heart that gives gathers. The abbot gathered not resentment, but integrity. Not frustration, but peace. his generosity was not dependent on receiving excellence in return. It flowed from the understanding that every person carries unseen burdens. This story also reveals the difference between enabling and compassion. True kindness does not excuse harm, but it recognizes humanity. The abbot's unexpected generosity created a pause, a small opening where reflection might arise. Understanding, as one Zen master taught, is another name for love. In a world focused on results, we often forget to honor effort. We withhold appreciation until perfection appears. Yet this teaching invites a gentler way, acknowledging intention, honoring willingness, and trusting the quiet power of kindness. Tonight, as you recall a recent disappointment, notice what seed you might plant. Perhaps encouragement instead of blame, gratitude instead of silence, or simply the choice to protect your own inner stillness. The Buddha reminded us that the moment anger arises, we step away from truth and toward the self. The abbot showed that remaining kind is more important than being right, and that our practice is revealed not by others' actions, but by our response to them. Now, let us turn to another story, one that explores the delicate balance between order and wholeness. In a monastery resting among gentle hills, where cherry blossoms floated softly in the spring air, a young monk received an assignment that filled him with pride. He was entrusted with caring for the vegetable garden. He embraced this task with deep determination, eager to prove his devotion to the path. Raised in a household that valued precision and control, he believed that perfection led to awakening. Each morning before dawn, he entered the garden with tools arranged carefully, plans written neatly in his notebook. He studied spacing, timing, and placement with great seriousness. Yet his greatest focus became the removal of weeds. The moment an unwanted plant appeared, he pulled it from the soil without hesitation. Day after day, he cleared every trace of disorder. Over time, the garden reflected his vision. Straight rows, even spacing, bare earth between plants, smooth and clean. One quiet afternoon, as sunlight filtered through nearby trees, the master came to walk through the garden. He moved slowly, observing the careful lines and empty soil. Then he stopped, standing silently, listening. The young monk approached, pride glowing softly in his face. "Master," he said, gesturing toward the garden, "what do you think? I have worked very hard to make it perfect." The master remained still for a moment longer. "The garden is very quiet," the master said simply. The young monk's face brightened with satisfaction. He heard these words as praise and nodded eagerly. "Yes," he replied, "I have removed all the noisy weeds, every single one. The garden is now peaceful and orderly, just as it should be." The master turned toward him. His eyes were gentle, holding both compassion and a quiet sorrow. A soft smile rested on his lips as he offered a teaching that would slowly loosen the young monk's grip on control. "You have also silenced the sound of rain falling on their leaves," the master said calmly, "the whisper of wind moving through their stems and the hum of insects feeding on their blossoms. Your garden is orderly, but it is not whole." The young monk stood still, as if time itself had paused. For the first time, he looked upon his garden without pride. Something subtle shifted within him. In that quiet moment, he began to sense what was missing from his carefully managed creation. The Buddha once taught that the middle way is the safest path. From this story arises a deep understanding of balance and the hidden danger of extremes. The young monk's devotion to perfect order reflects a common spiritual misunderstanding, the belief that awakening requires the removal of all disorder, uncertainty, and imperfection. Why do we struggle so deeply with the natural complexity of life? Zen teachings point gently toward our confusion about peace. The conditioned mind divides experience into problems and solutions, desirable and undesirable. Whatever feels uncomfortable is labeled a weed, and the mind declares war on it. This is what the sages call struggling against reality. The monk's garden mirrors how many of us treat our inner world. We identify certain thoughts, emotions, or conditions as enemies. Anxiety must be eliminated. Sadness must be fixed. Anger must be conquered. In our effort to become calm, we attempt to create an inner landscape as bare and controlled as that silent garden. Yet just as a living garden depends on diversity to support birds, insects, and soil, our inner life depends on the full range of human experience to remain alive and whole. The emotions we resist often carry important messages. Anxiety may be asking for attention. Sadness may be honoring a loss. Anger may be pointing toward a boundary that needs care. When we listen instead of erase, wisdom begins to speak. A Zen teacher once spoke of beginner's mind, the openness that allows us to meet each moment without rigid ideas. The young monk had lost this openness. Wonder had been replaced by control, listening by managing. Having decided which sounds were acceptable, he could no longer hear the garden's living song. Consider how this teaching touches our relationships. How often do we try to weed the people in our lives? We pull away affection when others disappoint us. We grow impatient with views that differ from our own. We try to shape loved ones into our image of how they should be. In doing so, we may gain order, but lose aliveness. The Master's words invite us to reflect on what we sacrifice in our pursuit of control. When we remove everything we label as a problem, we often lose beauty, information, and depth, things that only arise through complexity. A Vietnamese Zen teacher reminded us that because of impermanence, everything is possible. The wild plants the monk removed were part of the garden's cycles of renewal. They nourished the soil, supported life, and participated in the ongoing dance of change. In practice, this wisdom asks us to work with our experience rather than against it. Not to surrender to harm, but to meet difficulty with understanding instead of resistance. To move with life's rhythms rather than tightening against them. The Buddha taught moderation in all things. The young monk's dedication was sincere, yet unbalanced. Taken too far, it created sterility rather than harmony. True practice lives in the space between effort and ease, structure and flow, intention and acceptance. There is a quiet beauty in imperfection, in things that age, shift, and remain unfinished. A living garden honors both what is cultivated and what grows freely. Tonight, as you rest with these words, you might gently ask yourself where you are creating silent gardens in your own life. Where control has replaced listening. Where perfection has crowded out presence. What sounds have faded in the name of quiet? The Buddha taught that all conditioned things contain chaos, and that diligence lies in learning to live wisely within it. When we allow the full symphony of life, including its uneven notes, we discover a peace far deeper than rigid calm. Now, let us drift into another story, one that reveals the difference between knowing with the mind and understanding with direct experience. Along a dusty road leading to a great monastery in ancient China, An elderly woman kept a small tea stall. For 30 years, she served tea and simple rice cakes to monks and travelers passing through. Her hands were worn, her movements unhurried. Though she appeared ordinary, a quiet wisdom lived within her. Whenever a monk stopped at her stall, she served him with care. And as he prepared to leave, she would ask a simple question, spoken lightly, almost casually. "The great master teaches of ultimate reality," she would say. "Where is that reality right now?" She asked this question of hundreds of monks. Some were young, eager, full of newly learned ideas. Others were older, skilled in scripture and philosophy. Each treated her question as a problem to solve. They spoke of emptiness, interdependence, non-duality. They quoted texts and masters, weaving careful explanations. The older monks offered refined answers, pointing to what could not be spoken. To every response, the old woman replied gently, "That may be so." She neither praised nor dismissed them. She simply poured the tea. Most monks left believing her simple mind could not grasp their understanding. One morning, as mist rose and birds greeted the dawn, the monastery's head cook passed by. He was a practical man, shaped by daily work rather than study. His hands knew fire and knives, not scriptures. He ordered a rice cake and waited quietly. As she handed it to him, the woman asked her familiar question. "Where is ultimate reality right now?" The cook did not pause. He did not search for words. He simply picked up a rice cake, held it out to her, and smiled. "Here," he said, "have one of these." The old woman stood still. Then her eyes filled with light, and the broadest smile she had worn in 30 years spread across her face. And in that simple gesture, the road itself became the teaching. A soft laugh of pure joy escaped her lips. In that moment, she realized that after 30 years of questioning learned monks and respected scholars, she had finally met someone who truly understood. "After 30 years," she said quietly, her voice filled with wonder, "I have finally found one who understands." Ancient Buddhist wisdom reminds us that the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon itself. Here, we touch the clear difference between collecting ideas and directly seeing. The cook's simple act of offering a rice cake revealed an understanding that went beyond every refined explanation given by those trained in doctrine. Why do we so often complicate what is already present? Zen gently points to our conditioning. We are taught to believe that truth must be hidden, that wisdom must be complex, and that understanding requires layers of analysis. From an early age, we learn to trust concepts more than direct experience, to think about life rather than feel it. The monks who stopped at the old woman's stall had fallen into what teachers call the trap of knowledge. They carried vast stores of information about reality, yet had drifted away from reality itself. Their minds were skilled at explanation, but no longer rested in what was immediately here. We make the same mistake in everyday life. When asked about happiness, we may speak of theories or philosophies. Yet happiness is the warmth that rises when you laugh with a friend, the quiet satisfaction of finishing a simple task, the peace of watching light fade at the end of day. It is not hidden. It is already here. The cook's wisdom lived in his simplicity. He was not trying to impress. He was not performing. He responded naturally, knowing that ultimate reality is not separate from ordinary life. The rice cake in his hand was not a symbol. It was reality itself, complete and present. One teacher once said that our endless searching often prevents us from seeing what we already hold. Like people looking everywhere for their glasses while wearing them, the monks searched far away while truth rested in their hands. The old woman's long teaching also reveals another truth. Wisdom often appears where we least expect it. The monks did not imagine that a simple tea seller could be a teacher. Their assumptions about who holds wisdom blinded them to what was right before them. This pattern repeats in our lives. We overlook insights from children, elders, or those whose work seems ordinary. We travel far to hear famous voices while missing the teachings offered by daily encounters and simple moments. A Zen master taught that practice and awakening are not separate. The cook lived this truth. His years of chopping vegetables and serving meals were not apart from his path. They were his path. Every rice cake was an expression of care. Every meal was an offering of compassion. The Buddha said, "Look within. You are the Buddha." The cook's gesture pointed directly to this truth. Awakening was not hidden in concepts or distant practices. It was present in sharing food, in open hands, in kindness without effort. Tonight, as you rest with these words, you may gently ask yourself, where is the rice cake in your own experience? What simple reality are you overlooking while searching for something more? Perhaps it is the rise and fall of your breath, the weight of your body being supported, or the quiet aliveness of this moment. The Buddha taught that better than many empty words is a single one that brings peace. The cook offered the deepest teaching of all, a silent gesture that touched the heart directly. In that offering, he showed that awakening is not about gathering knowledge, but about recognizing the sacred simplicity that is always present. Now, let us continue with a story that speaks softly about responsibility, compassion, and the freedom found in letting go. In a monastery where autumn leaves covered the courtyard in shades of gold and red, there lived a monk whose face was etched with constant worry. His brow remained tense whether he walked the paths, sat in meditation, or shared meals with his brothers. Each step was accompanied by a heavy sigh, as if he carried an unseen weight that grew heavier each day. He had come to the monastery seeking peace. Instead, his heart became burdened by the suffering of the world. The more he studied compassion, the more intensely he felt every pain he encountered. News of disasters stole his sleep. Stories of illness and poverty filled him with grief. Even a wounded bird or a dying plant could pull him into hours of sorrow. His meditation became a place of worry rather than rest. Sitting on his cushion, his mind filled with images of suffering beings. He counted them endlessly, those without food, those in pain, those grieving loss. The weight of these thoughts pressed on his chest until even breathing felt heavy. The other monks noticed the change. Once engaged and present, he now moved slowly, shoulders curved forward as if holding something enormous. His joy faded, replaced by quiet exhaustion. At last, unable to carry it any longer, he went to his teacher. He found the master in the garden, calmly tending a small bed of late-blooming flowers that brightened the cooling air. The monk bowed deeply. His voice trembled as he spoke. "Master," he said, "I am drowning in the suffering of the world. When I wake, it feels as though the pain of all beings rests on my shoulders. How can I find peace when there is so much sorrow? How can I be at ease while others suffer?" The master looked at him with compassion and clear understanding. After a moment of silence, he replied with quiet simplicity, "Then put it down. The monk stared, confused. The answer seemed far too small for such a vast problem. He expected teachings on compassion, methods to endure sorrow, or praise for his concern. Seeing his confusion, the master set aside his tools and faced him fully. "Who asked you to pick it up?" he said gently. "You are not carrying the world. You are carrying your idea of the world. Let go of the idea and see what remains." The Buddha understood that suffering arises from resisting the truth that life includes pain. This story reveals the difference between true compassion and the self-created burden of trying to carry what was never ours. The monk's pain did not come from the world's suffering alone, but from his belief that he must personally hold it all. Zen points to this pattern within us. One root is subtle grandiosity, the belief that we are responsible for fixing what lies far beyond our reach. Disguised as care, it quietly exhausts the heart. And in this recognition, the path toward gentle release begins. Second, there is a quiet confusion within us between empathy and entanglement. True compassion, as taught in Buddhism, rests within what is sometimes called compassionate boundaries. We can feel sincere care for the suffering of others without allowing that suffering to settle inside our own hearts as a personal weight. The monk had lost this balance. Instead of caring, he absorbed. Instead of witnessing, he carried. Slowly, he turned himself into a vessel holding the pain of the entire world. Third, there is our subtle attachment to worry as a form of false control. By repeatedly turning the suffering of the world over in his mind, the monk began to believe that his anguish was somehow useful. He imagined that by suffering inwardly, he was helping those who suffered outwardly. Yet this is a misunderstanding of how healing truly arises. How often do we follow the same pattern? We worry about family members whose lives we cannot direct. We feel anxious about political events far beyond our influence. We lose sleep over environmental concerns that require collective wisdom, not solitary fear. Each moment of unnecessary worry becomes another burden we quietly lift onto our own shoulders. The master's simple question, "Who asked you to pick it up?" points to something profound. Much of our suffering is voluntary, though we rarely see it that way. We take on responsibilities that were never given to us. We accept mental assignments that do not belong to our path. Yes, suffering exists in the world, but our true responsibility is limited to what we can touch with wisdom, kindness, and skillful action. A Zen teacher once wrote that compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded, but a meeting between equals. The monk had placed himself above the world, believing he must heal it, rather than recognizing that he, too, was simply part of the human condition. This misunderstanding distorted his compassion and quietly increased suffering, both his own and that of those around him. The deeper teaching reveals that real compassion is guided by wisdom, not overwhelmed emotion. When the mind is flooded by the vastness of suffering everywhere, it becomes less able to respond to the suffering that is actually present. The monk's concern for distant pain blinded him to nearby chances for kindness, listening, and gentle presence within his own community. The Buddha taught that the mind shapes our world. What we repeatedly hold in thought, we gradually become. The monk had become suffering itself, rather than someone capable of easing suffering. His constant mental focus transformed him into another source of heaviness, undoing the very intention that had once been pure. This teaching also shows us the difference between caring and carrying. A physician can care deeply without taking illness home in the heart. A parent can love grown children without holding responsibility for every decision they make. A person can work toward justice without carrying guilt for every injustice that exists. The Master's instruction, to let go of the idea, points directly to one of Zen's clearest truths. We suffer far more from our thoughts about reality than from reality itself. The world holds pain, yes, but it also holds beauty, healing, laughter, kindness, and quiet miracles happening at the same time. The monk had focused on only one thread of the tapestry, weaving a picture far heavier than life truly is. A Vietnamese Zen master once said that when a plant does not grow well, we do not blame the plant. We look at the conditions. In the same way, the monk blamed himself for the suffering of the world instead of examining the mental habits that created unnecessary anguish. By turning inward with awareness rather than outward with control, peace became possible. Tonight, as your body rests and your breath slows, you might gently notice the worries moving through your own mind. Can you sense the difference between what truly belongs to you and what you have picked up out of habit or fear? Perhaps there are concerns you cannot change, guilt you do not need to carry, or outcomes that rest beyond your control. The Buddha taught that we only lose what we cling to. The monk's attachment to the idea of global responsibility created the weight he longed to escape. By practicing the quiet art of putting down what was never his to hold, he could rediscover lightness and a compassion that truly heals. And now, as this understanding settles softly within us, we turn to another Zen teaching, one that speaks of impermanence, ownership, and the gentle truth that nothing is ever truly ours. This is the story of the inn that believed it was a palace. Long ago in ancient India, there lived a revered spiritual teacher who spent many years walking from village to village, sharing the Buddha's teachings with anyone willing to listen. His wisdom and compassion became known across the land, reaching even the halls of kings. One day, during his travels, he arrived in the capital city of a powerful kingdom. Rising above the crowded streets stood a magnificent palace, gleaming like a jewel beneath the sun. Its marble walls shimmered with inlaid stones. Gardens of rare flowers surrounded flowing fountains, and guards in polished armor stood silently at their posts. It was clearly the home of immense wealth and authority. The teacher approached the entrance with the same calm presence he offered everywhere. The guards, recognizing his serene manner and simple robes, stepped aside. His arrival had already been announced. He walked through long corridors adorned with silk tapestries and golden statues until he reached the throne room. There, upon an elevated seat, sat the king, surrounded by courtiers dressed in fine garments, their jewels catching the light. The king looked up as the teacher entered. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice firm with command. The teacher bowed gently and spoke without hesitation. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "I seek a place to sleep in this inn." A wave of surprise passed through the room. The king frowned and gestured around him. "This is no inn," he replied. "This is my palace. I am the ruler of this kingdom, and this has been the seat of power for generations." And in that moment, the teaching was already beginning. The teacher nodded slowly, as though weighing the king's words with sincere care. "I see," he said softly. "May I ask, Your Majesty, who lived in this palace before you?" "My father," the king replied, his voice tightening almost without noticing. "He ruled here for 30 years until his death. This palace was his seat of power, just as it is now mine." The teacher inclined his head gently. "And who lived here before him?" "My grandfather," the king answered, now sensing the direction of these questions. "He ruled from this same throne. He too is gone." The teacher became silent. He allowed the meaning of these words to settle into the vast chamber like evening light. The courtiers grew still. Even the king found himself waiting. Then the teacher spoke again, his voice calm and clear. "So," he said, "this is a place where people stay for a short time and then depart. Did I hear you say that this is not an inn?" A deep silence followed. The king remained motionless, the teacher's words quietly passing through layers of belief and identity he had never examined. The palace, once so solid and eternal, seemed suddenly fragile. The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, and that awakening arises through clear seeing. This truth revealed itself fully in the teacher's simple question about the inn that believed it was a palace. Why do we cling so tightly to what cannot last? Zen teaches that suffering is born when we demand permanence from a world shaped by change. Everything we believe we own, our possessions, our status, even our sense of self, is held only for a time. Look gently into your own life. The home you return to, the work you identify with, the role you play each day. All of these are temporary dwellings. Others occupied them before you. Others will occupy them after you. This does not mean neglect or indifference. It invites a softer grip, a way of caring without clinging. The king's palace served an important purpose, yet it remained an inn, no matter how beautiful its walls. So too with our lives. When we forget the temporary nature of our roles, parent, professional, seeker, caretaker, we suffer trying to preserve what must naturally transform. The healthy body ages. The student becomes the teacher. The leader steps aside. These are not failures. They are expressions of the same flowing truth. A Zen master once taught that because things are impermanent, transformation is always possible. Pain can soften into understanding. Fear can open into compassion. Even long-held patterns can release their grip. Non-attachment does not mean coldness. It means loving fully without demanding that love remain unchanged. It means serving deeply without claiming ownership of results. We are all guests in this inn of existence, borrowing our names, roles, and belongings for a brief stay. Seen one way, this brings sorrow. Seen clearly, it brings freedom. The Buddha reminded us that because life is fleeting, we are called to live wisely. Not wasting our stay, but filling it with kindness, awareness, and care. Tonight, as you rest in your own temporary shelter, surrounded by things that will one day change, notice the quiet peace in knowing you do not have to hold them forever. Perhaps this awareness allows appreciation to deepen rather than fade. By remembering the shortness of our stay, each moment becomes precious. Each breath becomes meaningful. And now, as this understanding settles gently into your body, we turn to another teaching, one that reveals how quietly the ego can hide, even within sincere practice. This is the story of the Prime Minister's lesson. In the capital of the Tang dynasty, where golden roofs touched the sky and scholars debated beneath moonlit trees, there lived a man of remarkable achievement. The Prime Minister had earned his position through sharp intelligence and steady leadership, protecting the empire and guiding it toward prosperity. His name was spoken with respect across the land. Even the emperors sought his counsel. Yet within his heart, the Prime Minister believed himself a humble student of the Buddha's path. Each week, he set aside his robes of office and traveled in plain clothing to a quiet temple beyond the city walls. There, among old wooden beams and softly ringing wind chimes, he sat before his Zen master like any other seeker. Their relationship appeared balanced and sincere. The master showed neither special favor nor dismissal. The prime minister bowed with genuine respect. On one autumn afternoon, as golden leaves drifted past the temple windows, the prime minister spoke after meditation. "Revered teacher," he asked gently, "I have been reflecting on spiritual obstacles. Would you please explain the meaning of egotism in Buddhist teaching?" In an instant, the master's expression changed. His face reddened. His eyes flashed. And with sharp words filled with contempt, he snapped, "What a foolish question! Have you learned nothing in all your time here?" The prime minister recoiled, his body tightening as though struck. Never before had his teacher spoken to him this way. Heat rose in his chest. Indignation stirred in his mind. And without realizing it, the lesson had already begun. "How could this simple monk speak to me in such a way?" the prime minister's mind shouted in silence. He had governed provinces, advised emperors, commanded respect across the empire. Did this man not know who stood before him? His jaw tightened. His hands curled into fists. Heat surged through his chest as wounded pride transformed into rising anger. Then, as suddenly as the storm had formed, it vanished. The master's face softened into a gentle smile. His voice returned to its familiar warmth, calm and steady. "This," he said quietly, "is egotism." The words landed softly, yet they struck deeply. The Buddha taught that the ego is a veil, one that obscures clear seeing and separates us from truth. This story reveals how subtle and persistent that veil can be. Even when we believe humility has been cultivated, the ego waits patiently for the right moment to appear. It does not shout in silence. It reveals itself when we feel threatened. Why is it so difficult to see our own egotism? Zen teaches that the ego is like a shadow, always present, yet rarely noticed because we are facing the wrong direction. It is especially skilled at dressing itself in spiritual robes. We may meditate for years, study sacred teachings, serve others sincerely, and still carry a quiet sense of importance, a hidden belief that we are somehow special. The prime minister appeared humble in every outward way. But when his status was challenged, the ego rose instantly to defend its image. This is how ego reveals itself, not in stillness, but in reaction. Notice how this appears in daily life. A colleague interrupts, and irritation arises. A stranger questions your ability, and defensiveness tightens the body. A small insult ignites a large reaction. These moments are mirrors. A Zen teacher once said that we are already whole, and yet still learning to see clearly. This paradox guides our work with the ego. We do not fight it. We observe it. The ego feeds on both self-criticism and self-importance, but it softens under gentle awareness. When seen clearly, it loosens its grip. The master's teaching reveals another truth. Sometimes awakening does not come through softness, but through direct encounter. The sudden challenge shattered the prime minister's unconscious pattern, creating a moment of clarity. In Zen practice, this is called transparency, seeing through our reactions as they arise. We do not eliminate the ego. We relate to it more lightly. Tonight, as you notice moments of defensiveness or wounded pride, can you remember this lesson? Can you see these reactions not as failures, but as doorways into understanding? The Buddha taught that suffering arises from clinging. The ego is simply another story we cling to. And when the story loosens, freedom quietly appears. Now, let us turn to a teaching about the boundary between heaven and hell, one that exists not in distant realms, but within the human heart. This is the story of the samurai and the gates. In feudal Japan, a battle-hardened warrior sought out a renowned Zen master. His armor was scarred from countless conflicts, and his eyes reflected a life shaped by violence. He approached the master's modest dwelling carrying a question that had followed him through many battles. "Master," he said, bowing stiffly beneath the weight of his armor, "I have faced death many times. Tell me honestly, do heaven and hell truly exist after death?" The master studied him quietly. "Who are you," he asked calmly, "to ask such a question?" "I am a samurai," the warrior replied proudly. "I serve my lord with honor and have never fled from battle." The master laughed dismissively. "You," he said, "a warrior? Look at you. Your face is rough, your presence crude. What ruler would trust someone like you?" The word struck deeply. Anger surged through the samurai's body. His hand moved instinctively to his sword. "So you carry a blade," the master continued mockingly. "It is probably too dull to protect anyone at all." The warrior could no longer restrain himself. Steel sang as the sword left its scabbard. His vision narrowed. Rage consumed him. Then, in that precise moment, the master spoke clearly. "Here," he said, "the gates of hell open." The words cut through the warrior's fury. He saw himself fully gripped by anger, ready to kill over wounded pride. In that instant he understood. Hell was not elsewhere. It was this state of mind. Slowly, with trembling hands, he returned the sword to its sheath and bowed deeply. Then the master spoke again, gently. "Here," he said, "the gates of paradise open."
The Buddha taught that hatred never ends through hatred, but through understanding. This story reveals a profound truth. Heaven and hell are not destinations after death. They are states of consciousness entered moment by moment. Anger, greed, and confusion, the three poisons, pull us towards suffering. Awareness opens the door to peace. Each moment offers a choice. A careless word, an unexpected delay, a misunderstood intention. In Zen practice, we learn to recognize the moment before reaction, the moment when the gate appears. When awareness arises, paradise is already present. Tonight, as your breath slows and your body softens, remember this teaching. Notice the space between stimulus and response. In that space, freedom lives. As the Buddha taught, what we repeatedly think, we become. Now allow your thoughts to grow quiet. Let the gates rest, and drift gently toward sleep. In every moment, we stand before a quiet threshold. Through unconscious reaction, we open the gates of suffering. Through mindful presence, we open the gates of peace. Let us now continue with a teaching about the limits of knowing and the quiet honesty of not knowing. This is the story of the Emperor and Master Buddha. The Emperor of Japan, a man long accustomed to receiving clear answers from ministers and scholars, arranged a private meeting with Master Buddha, one of the most respected Zen teachers of his time. Though powerful, the emperor carried a sincere curiosity about spiritual matters, especially questions of life, death, and what might exist beyond ordinary perception. They sat together in a formal chamber usually reserved for affairs of state. Surrounded by polished wood and painted screens, the emperor felt at ease asking questions that had followed him for many years. Surely, he thought, if anyone could illuminate the great mystery of existence, it would be a master who had devoted his life to meditation and awakening. Master Buddha, the emperor began, speaking with practiced authority softened by genuine interest, there is a question that has occupied the minds of sages throughout history. What becomes of an enlightened person after death? The emperor expected a refined explanation, perhaps teachings on rebirth, subtle realms, or the continuation of awakened consciousness beyond the body. He was prepared for lofty words that would lift the veil from this final mystery. Instead, Master Buddha looked at him calmly and answered with complete simplicity. How should I know? The emperor was startled. Here stood a teacher revered across the land for his wisdom, openly admitting uncertainty. But, Master, the emperor insisted, struggling to hide his surprise, you are an enlightened teacher. Surely you must understand these matters. Buddha replied without hesitation, his tone clear and gentle. Yes, Your Majesty, but I am not a dead one. Within this brief exchange lives a profound teaching. The Buddha taught that true wisdom begins with recognizing the limits of one's knowing, not pretending insight where there is none, not decorating mystery with borrowed certainty. Master Buddha's response was not ignorance, it was integrity. Zen distinguishes sharply between ideas and experience, between what can be imagined and what can be directly known. A living teacher knows about living. What lies beyond death remains unknown until it is met. Yet how often do we feel compelled to appear certain? We offer strong opinions on matters we barely understand. We predict outcomes we cannot foresee. We speak with confidence to avoid the discomfort of uncertainty. The emperor assumed that enlightenment meant possessing answers to every cosmic question. Zen teaches something subtler. Awakening does not grant a catalog of secret knowledge. It transforms our relationship with not knowing. Suzuki Roshi called this don't know mind, a spacious awareness that does not rush to fill silence with belief. This is not confusion. It is openness. Another Zen master once said there is nothing special to learn, nothing special to gain. What happens after death remains a mystery, not a problem to be solved, but a truth to be honored through how we live. The Buddha encouraged direct observation over blind belief. He pointed not toward speculation, but toward freedom from unnecessary certainty. Master Buddha's teaching invites us to release the burden of having opinions about everything. How much mental tension comes from trying to know what cannot yet be known? Tonight, notice where you pretend certainty to protect yourself from uncertainty. What would soften if you allowed yourself to say, I don't know, with quiet confidence? Perhaps wisdom is not found in predicting the future, but in meeting the present fully. The mystery of death is honored not by explaining it, but by living honestly in its presence. In a world crowded with confident answers, the Master's simple honesty opens a gentler path, one that respects mystery while remaining grounded in direct experience. Now, let us turn toward a teaching about acceptance and the quiet art of contentment. This is the wisdom of the shepherd. Along a dusty mountain road, where wildflowers grew freely among the stones, a weary traveler came upon a shepherd watching over his flock. The sun climbed slowly upward, and clouds gathered across the sky, promising either cool rain or relentless heat. The shepherd sat calmly on a smooth rock, his sheep grazing peacefully nearby. His face reflected the ease of one who had spent many seasons beneath open skies, learning lessons that no book could teach. Drawn by the shepherd's serenity, the traveler called out, "Good morning, friend. What kind of weather do you think we'll have today?" The shepherd looked up and smiled gently. "The kind of weather I like," he replied. The traveler paused, puzzled. "How do you know?" he asked. The shepherd gestured toward the moving sky, clouds drifting, sunlight shifting. "I have learned," he said softly, that I cannot always get what I like. So I have learned to like what I get. The traveler stood quietly as the meaning settled. Here was a freedom no forecast could offer. The Buddha taught that attachment is the root of suffering. Contentment arises not from controlling circumstances, but from changing our relationship to them. The shepherd embodied great acceptance, not resignation, but harmony with reality as it unfolds. When we resist what is, we exhaust ourselves. When we align with what is, peace naturally appears. Tonight, as you rest, notice where you are resisting life. What might soften if you allowed yourself to like what arrives? Let the breath slow. Let the body rest. And allow acceptance to carry you gently toward sleep. Traffic jams, weather that refuses to follow our plans, people who act in ways we believe they should not. Each moment of resistance creates a subtle tightening in the mind, a quiet refusal of what is already here. These small inner protests accumulate, forming a background tension that we often mistake for normal life. The shepherd's way does not suggest passivity or indifference. It does not mean abandoning hopes or preferences. One may still enjoy sunshine and welcome warmth, while also opening the heart to rain. One may walk toward meaningful goals while remaining peaceful when outcomes shift. The difference lies in how tightly we cling. When preferences harden into demands, peace becomes conditional. But when preferences are held gently, life can move freely through us. A Zen master once said that the great way is not difficult for those who do not cling to preferences. This does not mean erasing desire, but releasing the belief that the world must align with our wishes for us to be at ease. Desire becomes suffering only when it insists. Look quietly into your own experience. How often does the mind argue with reality? How often does it whisper, "I will be calm when this changes," or "I will be happy once this ends"? This tension is optional. Not because desire is wrong, but because it can be held with wisdom instead of force. The Buddha taught that attachment does not mean caring deeply. It means tying our inner peace to circumstances behaving according to our expectations. The shepherd cares for his flock, tends his duties, and values comfort. Yet his contentment rests deeper than outcomes. Tonight, as the day gently dissolves, notice both pleasant moments and difficult ones. Can you sense the shepherd's secret within your own awareness? What if contentment is not waiting in the future, but quietly present now, available through a softening of perspective? As the Buddha reminded us, happiness does not depend on what we possess or who we appear to be. It arises from how the mind meets experience. When we stop demanding that life obey our plans, a quiet freedom emerges. We begin to enjoy life as it arrives, moment by moment. From acceptance, we now turn toward a deeper teaching, one that points beyond ideas and into direct experience. This is a story about trying to grasp what cannot be held. In a secluded monastery garden, where cherry blossoms drifted gently on the morning air, Master Seo sat beside one of his most devoted students. The young monk had studied the Buddha's teachings for many years. His mind was full of concepts: impermanence, no self, emptiness. He could speak eloquently about form and void, about the illusion of solidity. Yet despite his understanding, something felt incomplete. The teachings lived in his thoughts, but not yet in his bones. Approaching his teacher with respectful humility, the monk spoke. "Master, I have studied emptiness deeply. I understand that all things arise and pass, that nothing stands alone or lasts forever. Yet my understanding feels distant. Please help me grasp emptiness itself." Master Seo looked at him kindly, recognizing a struggle common to many sincere seekers. "Show me," the master said softly, "how you would grasp emptiness." The monk paused, then slowly cupped his hands in the air, as though holding something invisible and delicate. His posture was careful, his expression serious. "I am holding emptiness," he said. The master observed the empty space between the monk's palms and gently shook his head. "You are holding nothing," he replied. "Only air, dressed up with an idea." The monk's shoulders fell. "Then please," he said, "show me the right way." Without warning, Master Seo reached forward and firmly grasped the monk's nose. A sharp sensation burst forth. The monk cried out, startled and alive with sensation. Releasing his grip, the master smiled. "That," he said, "is how emptiness is grasped." Confusion filled the monk's mind as he held his aching nose. The pain was undeniable, clear, immediate, real. Yet even as he noticed it, the sensation was already changing, already fading. In that moment, the monk saw. The pain had arisen from nowhere and would return to nowhere. It had no fixed substance, no lasting form. And yet, while present, it was entirely real. More importantly, all conceptual thinking had vanished. There was only direct experience. No observer and no observed, just sensation. Here, the teaching revealed itself. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not the absence of experience, but its true nature. Everything appears, lingers briefly, and dissolves. Nothing remains, yet nothing is denied. Why do we struggle to understand emptiness as an idea when it is already woven into every breath? Zen points us away from thought and back into immediacy. The monk's error was gentle and human. He tried to treat emptiness as an object. But emptiness is what allows objects to arise at all. Notice now, where do thoughts come from? Where do they go? Sensations, sounds, even the sense of being someone listening, appearing and disappearing like clouds in an open sky. This openness is not blank or cold. It is alive, spacious, and aware. The master's gesture did not deny sensation, it revealed its fleeting nature. Everything arises within awareness, shines briefly, and fades without residue. A Zen teaching says the wise abandon their thoughts, not their perceptions. The monk had been clinging to ideas instead of trusting experience. In daily life, this teaching appears again and again. Anger that feels solid, where does it go? Worry that feels heavy, what is its true substance? Even the sense of self is more like a flowing river than a fixed form. The Buddha reminded us that all conditioned things are impermanent. This is not philosophy. It is an invitation to notice what is already happening. Tonight, as thoughts and sensations rise and fall, can you sense the emptiness they move within? Not as an idea, but as the gentle space holding everything. This emptiness is not separate from fullness. It is fullness. The sky does not divide itself into east and west. The mind does. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to achieve. Emptiness is already here. As we continue this journey, we arrive at another teaching, one that reveals how perception itself shapes reality. This is the story of the eggplant in the dark. His devotion was steady and sincere. His meditation was disciplined. His vow of nonviolence was held with complete seriousness. For many years, he had walked the path by the light of clear rules and careful conduct, finding reassurance in structure and certainty. One night without moonlight, after evening meditation had ended, he walked slowly along the familiar garden path toward his small room. The darkness was deep and complete, broken only by faint outlines he recognized by memory alone. He had walked this path countless times. Yet something about this night felt quietly uncertain. Suddenly, his foot pressed down on something soft. A wet, heavy sound broke the silence, echoing sharply in his mind. The monk froze. Before any clear seeing could arise, his thoughts rushed forward. He believed he had stepped on a frog carrying eggs. The conclusion struck him with force. The first precept forbids taking life. And now he believed he had broken it. Not once, but many times over. Shock turned to horror. His breath grew shallow as guilt surged through him like a flood. He knelt in the darkness, hands trembling, trying to understand what he had done. But the night revealed nothing. His mind spun endlessly. How could this happen? How could he, of all people, be so careless? Sleep did not come. When he finally lay down, his thoughts continued without rest. In dreams, frogs appeared in great numbers, their eyes wide and unblinking. They surrounded him, accusing him without words. He woke again and again, each time reliving the imagined act. His peace dissolved. His confidence shattered. By morning, his entire practice felt hollow. As dawn slowly illuminated the monastery garden, he returned to the path with heavy steps. Fear lingered in every movement. But when light finally revealed the ground beneath him, the monk stopped. There was no frog, no sign of harm, only an overripe eggplant, split open from the weight of his step. In that moment, relief passed through him. But something far deeper followed. Standing there, he understood. Nothing external had caused his suffering. The entire night of anguish had been created by his mind alone. Here, at last, he truly encountered the teaching. There is no fixed, objective world apart from perception. The sound, the darkness, the uncertainty, these were simple. Everything else had been imagined. Zen practice revealed itself not as perfect rule-keeping, but as clear seeing. Not as avoidance of mistakes, but freedom from assumptions. The Buddha taught that the world we experience arises from thought. And the monk now knew this truth directly. We suffer not from events, but from the stories we tell ourselves about them. How often do we step on eggplants in the dark? A message unanswered, a glance misunderstood, a silence misread. From uncertainty, the mind creates meaning. From meaning, emotion. From emotion, suffering. The mind fills gaps quickly, often choosing fear. Zen reminds us to pause, to see what is truly known, and to notice what is being added. As night returns and thoughts soften, can you remember the monk? Can you rest in not knowing without rushing to conclusions? The monk's awakening did not come from stricter discipline. It arose from clarity already present. And so, the journey continues, now toward a teaching about movement and surrender. This is the wisdom of the old man and the waterfall. In a mountain village where a river carved its way through ancient stone, an elderly sage often walked beside the flowing water. He watched how currents curved around rocks, how force met softness. Villagers knew him as a quiet man, one who listened more than he spoke. He seemed to understand something essential about the world. One afternoon, storm clouds gathered suddenly. Rain fell hard. The river swelled and roared, rushing toward a tall waterfall that plunged into a rocky gorge below. The old man was caught in the storm. As he walked, the muddy ground gave way beneath his feet. In an instant, he was swept into the current. Villagers cried out, running helplessly along the riverbank as he was carried toward the falls. There was nothing they could do. They watched in silence as he disappeared over the edge. All believed he was gone. But when they reached the base of the waterfall, they saw him emerge from the water unharmed. He walked calmly to the shore and rested as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Amazed, they gathered around him. "How did you survive?" they asked. The water was wild, the rocks unforgiving. The old man smiled gently. "I did not fight the water," he said. "I allowed myself to move as it moved. When it turned, I turned. When it fell, I fell. I became like the water." The villagers understood. They had witnessed more than survival. They had seen wisdom in action. Life is always changing. Resistance creates suffering. Flow reveals possibility. When we align with what is, strength appears where struggle once lived. As the Buddha taught, all things are in motion. Tonight, as your breath rises and falls, consider the water. Not forcing, not resisting, simply moving. And in this gentle movement, rest may finally arrive. Difficulties are rarely eased by pushing against them with force. More often, they soften when we understand their nature and learn how to move with the currents beneath them. Look quietly at a source of tension in your life right now. Where are you trying to make the water turn instead of learning how to float with it? What would it mean to adapt gently to circumstances while still honoring your deepest values? Tonight, as daily life brings its familiar currents, unexpected changes, challenging people, situations beyond your control, can you remember the old man's wisdom? Can you stay rooted within yourself while allowing life to move as it will? Sometimes the most direct path forward is not through resistance, but around it. The Buddha reminded us that, in the end, only three things truly matter: how we have lived, how we have loved, and how well we have learned to let go. To flow with life does not mean losing ourselves. It means releasing the illusion that everything must be controlled, while staying awake and responsive to what arises. Like water, we can be soft yet strong, yielding yet persistent, gentle yet enduring. As our journey continues, we turn now toward a story about transforming our relationship with suffering. This is the teaching of the salt and the lake. In a quiet monastery resting among rolling hills, there lived an elderly master known for his deep patience and steady presence. Among his students was a young apprentice whose heart had grown heavy with complaint. Each morning, the apprentice arrived carrying fresh frustrations. "Master," he would say, "life is so difficult. Yesterday my meditation was disturbed by noise. Today my body aches from the hard floor. When will this suffering end?" The master listened without interruption, his eyes kind and attentive. But as days became weeks, he saw that words alone would not shift the young man's understanding. One clear morning, sunlight filling the room with warmth, the master spoke. "My friend," he said softly, "please bring me a handful of salt from the kitchen." Though puzzled, the apprentice returned with coarse white crystals resting in his palms. The master placed a small glass of water before him. "Put the salt into this glass," he said, "and drink." The apprentice hesitated. "That is far too much salt for so little water." "Trust," the master replied gently. The salt dissolved quickly. The apprentice drank and immediately grimaced. The taste was sharp, bitter, overwhelming. "How is it?" the master asked. "Unbearable," the apprentice replied. The master smiled. "Good. Now come with me." They walked together until they reached a vast mountain lake, still and clear beneath the open sky. The master gestured. "Now place the same salt into the lake." The apprentice scattered the crystals across the water. They vanished without a trace. "Drink," the master said. The water tasted pure and refreshing. "Do you taste the salt?" the master asked. "No," the apprentice said quietly. The master sat beside him and spoke with tenderness. "The pain of life is like salt. No more, no less. But suffering depends on the container that holds it. When pain arises," he continued, "you can be a small glass where every grain overwhelms you. Or you can become a lake wide enough to hold it without harm. Do not be a glass," the master said. "Become a lake." The Buddha taught that pain is unavoidable, but suffering is not. We cannot remove all hardship from life, but we can change how we meet it. Awareness is not fixed in size. It can contract until every difficulty feels enormous, or expand until challenges are held with ease. We often choose the glass because the mind narrows around discomfort, because stories grow, because comparisons arise. The lake does not deny pain. It simply holds it without drowning. Through meditation, awareness widens. Through gratitude, perspective grows. Through compassion, pain becomes shared rather than isolating. Tonight, as you notice difficulties within yourself, can you feel the difference between being a glass and being a lake? What happens when awareness softens and expands? The Buddha said that clarity brings peace. Not the absence of salt, but the space to hold it. From this spaciousness, pain can open into wisdom. And so we continue toward another teaching, one that reveals the limits of conceptual understanding. This is the lesson of 3 strikes and deeper vision. At a mountain monastery where the 6th patriarch Huineng taught, students gathered from far and wide. Among them was a young monk named Xin Hui, known for his sharp intellect and probing questions. One afternoon, Xin Hui approached the master as sunlight filled the hall. "Master," he asked confidently, "when you meditate, do you see or not?" Without warning, the patriarch struck him 3 times with his teaching stick. "When I strike you," the master asked calmly, "does it hurt or not?" Shen Hui hesitated, sensing something beyond logic. "It both hurts and does not hurt," he replied. "I both see and do not see," the patriarch said. Confused, Shen Hui pressed further. "How can both be true?" The master replied gently, "I see the movements of my own mind. I do not see the right and wrong of others." Here, the teaching settled. True seeing turns inward. True clarity releases judgment. And as the night deepens, this gentle understanding invites rest. With these words, the teaching quietly settled into place. The master was not pointing toward mystical visions or extraordinary states of consciousness. He was revealing a far more subtle transformation, the shift in perception that comes with genuine spiritual maturity. Ancient Buddhist wisdom reminds us, the mind shapes all things. What we hold in thought, we become. This insight flows directly from the patriarch's lesson on awakened seeing. Why do spiritual teachings often feel confusing, even contradictory, when we try to understand them with logic alone? Zen Buddhism explains that the ordinary mind moves through pairs of opposites, seeing and not seeing, pain and no pain, right and wrong. Awakened awareness does not erase these experiences. Instead, it softens our attachment to them. The deeper teaching reveals what true spiritual perception actually is. The patriarch sees clearly the movements of his own mind, the rising and fading of thoughts, emotions, and reactions. This clarity is not supernatural. It is the natural fruit of long attention, quiet observation, and patient practice. At the same time, he does not see in the habitual way of judgment. He does not cling to ideas of good and bad, right and wrong, when looking at others. This non-seeing is not blindness. It is wisdom, knowing that judgment often reveals more about the one who judges than the one being judged. Now, gently turn inward. How much of what you believe you see in others is shaped by your own inner patterns? When irritation arises, are you truly seeing the other person or your own unresolved reactions? When admiration appears, are you seeing their essence or your longing for approval or success? This ancient teaching illuminates the difference between reactive perception and clear seeing. Reactive perception is colored by memory, emotion, expectation, and habit. Clear seeing is aware of these movements without being carried away by them. Zen Master Dogen taught, "To study the way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." True seeing turns attention inward, not outward. It is less concerned with evaluating the world and more devoted to understanding the mind that perceives it. The 3 strikes Shen Hui received were not punishment. They were a direct, compassionate teaching. Pain arose. It was felt fully. And yet, awareness itself remained untouched. In the same way, thoughts and emotions arise within consciousness without staining its natural clarity. Consider how this understanding might gently change your daily life. Instead of constantly assessing others, comparing, judging, or correcting, what if you simply observed the movements within your own mind? What patterns might you notice in its wanderings? Its fears, its hopes, its habits? This does not mean losing discernment or becoming passive. It means responding from clarity rather than reacting from conditioning. In Zen, this is called mirror mind, awareness that reflects everything without clinging, without distortion. Tonight, as thoughts come and go, can you watch them as the mirror watches reflections? Can you turn toward the one who sees, instead of becoming lost in what is seen? The Buddha spoke of this gentle turning inward when he said, "You yourself, as much as anyone in the universe, deserve your own compassion." When we learn to see our inner patterns with kindness, we naturally extend that same understanding outward. And now, let us move into another quiet teaching. A story of a young monk who believed he had failed. This is the story of the Golden Wake. At a peaceful monastery overlooking a still mountain lake, a young student sat alone on the temple steps. The sun was lowering toward the water, painting the sky in warm shades of amber. His shoulders were heavy, his heart weighed down by disappointment. For months, he had struggled. The teachings seemed to slip through his grasp. Meditation felt restless. Confidence faded. "The boat is coming to take me home," he said softly to his teacher, who had sat beside him without a sound. "I have failed here. What can I tell my family?" The teacher gazed across the lake, where a small wooden boat glided slowly through the glowing water. "Tell them," the teacher said gently, "that you did your best. That is enough." "But I wanted to become a great monk," the boy whispered. "I wanted to teach, to guide others, to matter." "You still can," the teacher replied. "How?" the boy asked, confusion and sorrow mingling in his voice. "I could not even stay awake in meditation." The teacher smiled and pointed toward the lake. "Watch the boat." The boy followed his gaze. "Do you see the wake behind it?" the teacher asked. "See how the light spreads across the water, forming a widening path?" The boy nodded slowly. "That boat is you," the teacher said. "The lake is your life. The wake is the influence you leave behind. Every ripple touches another ripple. When you live with sincerity, kindness, and patience, you teach without words. Some will carry that kindness forward, and their actions will create more light. Notice," the teacher added softly, "how each ripple reflects the sun back to the sky." The boy watched as the water shimmered, countless points of light returning upward. Hope stirred quietly within him. "Would you come home and explain this to my father?" the boy asked. The Buddha reminds us, one candle does not lose its flame by lighting another. True influence is not born from perfection or recognition. It flows naturally from a heart committed to goodness. And as this understanding settles, the mind grows quiet, the breath softens, and rest comes gently, like ripples fading into still water. Why do we quietly assume that only titles, recognition, or formal success give our lives meaning? Zen wisdom gently points us toward a misunderstanding, our habit of seeking validation from the outside, while overlooking how wisdom truly moves from one heart to another. We imagine that teaching requires a stage, a name, or a credential. Yet the deepest lessons are rarely spoken aloud. They are transmitted through presence, through sincerity, through the quiet alignment between what we believe and how we live. Think of the people who have touched your life most deeply. Often, it is not through expertise, but through kindness. A calm voice at the right moment, a patient smile, a listening presence that asks for nothing, a shop clerk who greets you warmly, a stranger who helps without expectation, a friend who stays silent and simply allows you to be heard. These moments leave traces, ripples spreading outward, far beyond what the giver may ever notice. In Zen, this is sometimes called wordless teaching. It arises naturally when our actions reflect our deepest values. Like the boat crossing the lake, we may never see the wake behind us, yet it continues to spread, touching distant shores. The Buddha reminded us that a single flame can light countless others without losing its own brightness. Joy does not diminish when shared. Kindness does not run out when offered freely. Each moment lived with authenticity becomes a lesson. Each compassionate response sends light quietly outward. Each pause before reacting reflects something luminous back into the world. Tonight, as you rest, can you sense the gentle wake you are already creating? Perhaps it appears in patience offered to someone difficult, in encouragement given softly, in the calm presence you bring into ordinary moments. The light you reflect may be guiding paths you will never see. And now, let us turn to another quiet teaching, a story about the truth that shapes all experience. This is the teaching of the student of meditation and the wise reminder. A young practitioner had devoted himself sincerely to meditation. Each morning and evening he sat on his cushion, closed his eyes, and followed his breath as he had been taught. Some days the practice felt calm and effortless. But recently, restlessness had taken over. On one particular morning, frustration rose quickly. His thoughts raced endlessly. His body ached. His attention drifted again and again. After what felt like a long struggle, he gave up and sought his teacher. He found the old monk in the garden, gently pulling weeds beneath the early sun. "Teacher," the student said, heavy with self-judgment, "my meditation is terrible. I cannot focus. My body hurts. My mind will not settle. Everything feels wrong." The teacher listened quietly. Then, without urgency or concern, he replied, "It will pass." And he returned to his gardening. The student stood there, unsettled. He had expected instructions, encouragement, perhaps correction. Instead, only 3 simple words. Over the next days, he continued to sit. Slowly, without effort, something softened. The body adjusted. The mind grew less restless. Moments of ease appeared between thoughts. By the end of the week, the practice felt light and clear. Filled with joy, the student rushed back to his teacher, who was now sweeping the courtyard. "My meditation is wonderful," he said. "My mind is calm. My body feels at ease. Everything is clear and alive." The teacher paused, looked at him gently, and said the same words as before. "It will pass." This time, the student understood. The teaching was not about meditation alone. It was about life itself. All experiences arise. All experiences fade. Pleasure and discomfort. Clarity and confusion. Success and failure. Suffering grows when we cling to what feels good and resist what feels difficult. Zen teaches us to rest in equanimity, not indifference, but balance. Not withdrawal, but steadiness. There is a deeper stability beneath all changing conditions. Not the stability of permanence, but the stability of awareness itself, the open space in which everything appears and disappears. Notice how much energy is spent trying to hold on to pleasant states. How much tension arises when we push against what we do not want. Both grasping and resistance create fatigue. When we allow experiences to come and go, something inside us remains untouched. The teacher's words offer comfort in pain and humility in joy. They remind us not to build our identity on passing states. As a Zen master once said, "You are complete as you are, and there is room to grow." Tonight, as sensations, thoughts, or emotions move through you, whether gentle or restless, can you allow them to pass like clouds across a wide sky? Can you rest as the sky itself? The Buddha taught that all conditioned things are impermanent, and in knowing this, we are freed. Just as the ocean has one taste, so too does this teaching have one flavor, the taste of release. Now, let the breath soften. Let the body rest. Everything that arises will pass. And awareness remains, quiet, open, and at ease. The taste of release is not found in holding on to pleasant moments forever, but in discovering the quiet freedom that comes from moving gently with change itself. Life breathes in cycles. Nothing stays. Nothing needs to be forced. And so, let us drift into another story, one that reveals the difference between borrowed understanding and wisdom grown through living. This is the teaching of following the stream. Deep within a wide wilderness, where tall pines reached endlessly toward the sky, two men from the city found themselves lost. What had begun as a simple walk into nature had quietly unraveled. Confidence replaced preparation. Familiar paths disappeared. For a full day and night, they wandered beneath the trees. Anxiety tightened with every hour. Each turn looked the same. Every direction led only to more uncertainty. The noise of their former lives felt impossibly far away. Just as fear began to take hold, they came upon an old hermit seated calmly near a small clearing. His face bore the softness of many seasons lived slowly. His presence alone seemed to ease their breath. "How do we return to the world?" they asked, voices strained and tired. The hermit looked at them gently, seeing not only their location, but their state of mind. "I could tell you," he said, "but you would still lose your way." The men exchanged puzzled glances. "Then what should we do?" they asked. "Go with the flow," the hermit replied. They hesitated. The words felt too simple. The hermit smiled and pointed to a stream flowing quietly through the clearing. "Follow the water. Streams become creeks. Creeks become rivers. Rivers pass through villages. You will have water to drink," he added softly, "and nourishment along the way." The advice made sense. Water always leads somewhere living. But one man paused and asked, "Is this what Zen means by going with the flow?" The hermit considered this for a moment. "Yes," he said, "and no." Then he rose and walked on, leaving the men to discover the meaning for themselves. The Buddha taught that whether we understand or not, things remain as they are. Wisdom does not change reality. It changes how we meet it. The hermit's guidance worked on two levels at once. On the surface, it was survival. Beneath, it was a way of living. He knew that giving directions might solve a moment, but it would not awaken understanding. True guidance does not hand us answers. It teaches us how to listen. We often seek clear instructions for life. Tell me what to do. Show me the fastest path. Give me certainty. But wisdom grows differently. It teaches us how to read the land beneath our feet, how to sense direction moment by moment. Like water finding its way to the sea, there is a natural intelligence within us. When we learn to trust it, movement becomes effortless. Going with the flow is not surrendering responsibility. It is aligning effort with reality. It is moving with the grain of life instead of against it. The stream does not know the ocean. It only knows how to move now. In the same way, mindfulness allows us to respond without needing to control the whole journey. Tonight, as you rest, can you sense the quiet current beneath your thoughts? The gentle direction that does not rush, yet never stops moving. Trusting this current does not remove challenges, but it softens resistance. And now, we turn toward another teaching, one about desire, doubt, and the power of the mind. This is the story of the wishing tree. A poor man walked slowly through a forest thick with shadows. His shoulders bent beneath worry, debts unpaid, relationships strained, dreams delayed. Each step echoed with thought upon thought, concern leading to concern. The beauty around him went unnoticed. Tired and thirsty, he leaned against a broad tree with smooth bark and steady roots. "I wish I had something to drink," he whispered. In that very moment, a cup of cool, clear water appeared in his hand. He stared in disbelief, turning it slowly, wondering if his mind was playing tricks. The water shimmered softly, real and inviting. And as the forest breathed quietly around him, the man felt something shift, though he did not yet understand what it meant. For now, let the breath slow. Let the body soften. The stream flows. The path unfolds. And rest arrives, one gentle moment at a time. Slowly, almost hesitantly, the man lifted the cup to his lips. He drank. The water was cool and clear, sweeter than anything he had ever known. It soothed his dry throat and seemed to flow through his entire body, easing a tiredness he had carried for years. "That is strange," he whispered. Just then, his stomach tightened with hunger. Without effort, without planning, a thought arose. "I wish for something to eat." Before him appeared a simple meal laid upon a wooden plate. Fresh bread, ripe fruit, vegetables still glistening as if just gathered from the earth. The scent alone felt nourishing. He ate slowly, each bite filled with quiet wonder. "My wishes are coming true," he murmured, awe spreading through his chest. Excitement began to rise. "Well then," he said, smiling to himself, "I wish for a home." Beyond the tree, in a sunlit meadow, a beautiful house emerged. Light poured through wide windows. Gardens bloomed effortlessly. Peace seemed to rest in every corner. His heart raced with joy. "If I have a home like this," he thought, "I will need help to care for it." And in that moment, gentle figures appeared, kind faces bowing softly, ready to serve. The man laughed aloud, almost dizzy with happiness. Then another thought surfaced. What is a home without someone to share it with? He wished for companionship, a loving presence. And beside him stood a woman, radiant and warm, her eyes calm and understanding. As she reached for his hand, something shifted. An old voice stirred within him. Familiar. Heavy. "Wait," he said, pulling back. "This is impossible. People like me are not this fortunate. This cannot be real." As the doubt took shape, everything began to fade. The woman dissolved into light. The servants vanished. The house disappeared. Even the memory of the meal slipped away. Once again, he stood alone beneath an ordinary tree, the weight of his worries returning as if they had never left. "I knew it," he muttered, turning away. And with that, he walked back into the forest, his mind settling comfortably into its familiar patterns of concern and complaint. The Buddha taught that we become what we think, that our world is shaped moment by the beliefs we hold. This story reveals the quiet power of trust and the quiet destruction of doubt. So often, we believe our limits more deeply than our possibilities. We grow accustomed to struggle, until ease feels suspicious. Abundance feels undeserved. Love feels temporary. And so, when kindness appears, when beauty reveals itself, when opportunity knocks softly, we turn away. The wishing tree reflects the nature of mind itself. Life responds not only to effort, but to belief. When we meet the world with openness, possibilities appear. When we meet it with suspicion, they vanish. The man had everything he needed, yet his identity was rooted in lack. And so lack returned. This is not punishment. It is conditioning. Zen teaches us to notice when we step away from goodness simply because it feels unfamiliar. A compliment dismissed. A friendship doubted. A moment of joy shortened because it feels fragile. Each time, we leave our own wishing tree behind. Wise doubt seeks truth. Unwise doubt assumes unworthiness. Tonight, as you rest, notice where you may have turned away from something good today. And ask gently, what if you were allowed to receive? Now, let us turn to another teaching. One so simple it is often overlooked. This is the dialogue between Joshu and Nansen, and the teaching of the ordinary mind. In a quiet mountain monastery, where mist drifted through ancient pines and bells echoed softly across the valley, two masters sat facing one another. Joshu, a sincere and devoted monk, bowed to his teacher. "Master," he asked, "what is the way?" Nansen answered without hesitation, "Ordinary mind is the way." Joshu was puzzled. "If that is so," he asked, "should we strive to cultivate it?" Nansen shook his head. "The moment you aim for it," he said, "you move away from it." Joshu frowned. "Then how can we know it?" Nansen replied calmly, "The way does not belong to knowing or not knowing. Knowing turns it into an idea. Not knowing turns it into emptiness. When you realize it without doubt, it is vast, without boundaries." At these words, Joshu's searching mind relaxed. Nothing new appeared, yet everything felt clear. The Buddha taught that there is nothing missing, nothing to attain. What we seek is the awareness already present. We struggle because we believe awakening must be extraordinary, something dramatic, something far away. But enlightenment is not elsewhere. It is this mind, this breath, this simple knowing. Thoughts rise, sensations shift, sounds come and go. This is ordinary mind. And this is the way. Like the sky holding clouds and clear space alike, awareness remains unchanged. When we stop chasing special states, we discover the quiet miracle of what already is. Washing dishes becomes meditation. Listening becomes prayer. Breathing becomes enough. Tonight, as you lie here, aware of these words, aware of your breath, aware of rest approaching, notice how nothing needs to change. Peace is not something you create. It is something you remember. The calm you feel now was never absent. It was only waiting for you to stop searching. May this ease remain with you, a gentle companion through whatever comes next. Rest now. You are already home.